Welcome in, everyone. Welcome to our mindful lunch discussion with Christine Hanlon on writing for connection, wholeness, and well-being. See, I'm looking over at this side now. So I moved the screen all over the place. I invite you to, as we wait for a couple more friends to join us, maybe you might want to put into the chat just a quick note, a sentence or two on the last thing that you wrote. What was the last thing that you wrote? Maybe just pop that into the chat. It could be that life memoir, it could be that journal, maybe it was your grocery list. Welcome in, Jocelyn. Good to see you. What was the last thing that you wrote? You don't have to say what the actual thing is. Notes from classes and random journaling from SJ. Thank you. Heidi says, journal. Nice. A newsletter article. Awesome. Oh, Elaine, a poem. Lovely. Lovely. From Janine, the last thing she wrote 10 seconds before she logged in, a dialogue with her deep inner self. That's cool. That's profound and amazing. Just making lots of things bigger on my screen here for reading. Julie's last thing that she wrote was an email for work. Haha, otherwise personally a list of errands to complete on a weekend. That's how it goes sometimes. That's how it goes sometimes. For David, daily journaling. For Geraldine, an email to her curriculum writer on a topic of negotiation. And that was just moments ago. Heidi, a report to government. Oh, serious business. And for Paula, email from work and a letter to her kids' teacher. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. The last thing I wrote before I came onto this Zoom call and all the prep stuff was also an email to my kids' teachers at school. And this was a fun email to write because I was writing an email of thanks. Thank you for being there for my kiddos this past couple of months. So welcome in, everyone. I'm going to switch my screen over to this side now because I feel like turning my head the other way. My name is Patlee, and I want to welcome you all into the space for Mindful Lunch Conversation. Thank you for taking time out to join us over your lunch break. Lunch is welcome. Cameras on or off are welcome. And we're recording this session so that we can share it afterwards with you and other persons who've registered that might not be able to attend. We're also going to share the recording on our media pages. So thank you very much for agreeing to be in the session while it's being recorded. I'd like to start us off with just an invitation to find ourselves in the space. For those of you who are accustomed to or have visited a mindful lunch session with us before, or if you're accustomed to journaling, you certainly know what the whole idea of arrival means. So I'm just going to invite you to arrive in this less than an hour of mindful conversation by just coming into what I call silence. Right? Just finding yourself into silence, not just the verbal orientation to silence, but just this quieting of the body, thoughts, minds, as much as we can. It's never going to be perfect because our bodies are still moving, heart's still beating, things are still doing their thing. So just finding ourselves in that silence or stillness, whatever that might look like for us. For some of us, it might mean maybe putting silence on our phones or turning on that do not disturb. Just this little window till 1 o'clock. And for some of us, it might look like just if we're sitting, giving our weight over to the chair, and just noticing what that feels like. to not hold things in our bodies, but to just let the chair and the ground take the weight for just a little bit. And that might also feel like feeling our feet planted firmly on the ground. And then if this is available to you, I invite you to close your eyes. You can keep your eyes open if that's more comfortable for you, but I invite you to close your eyes if you can. And I invite you into a bit of reflection on the words that I'm going to read from this poem. The poem is called Silence. Listen. Can you hear it? Thundering in the trees and buzzing through the grass. Breathe. Can you taste it? The sweet mist seasoning the morning air. Embrace it. This is your reward for stepping away from the noise, away from the fuss and bustle, away from those tales and quieting the thoughts of toils and worries. This is what you came for. So sit. Listen. Breathe. Touch the silence. Then when you're ready, opening your eyes. Coming back to that feeling off your seat in the chair. Feeling fresh. Aware. And ready to be with us in this room for a little bit of a mindful conversation. Thank you. So just a quick introduction about myself, for those of you who are joining us for the first time. So like I said, my name is Patlee. I am the lead facilitator and the founder of Reyou. And Reyou, my company, works supportively with people and teams that are experiencing major transitions. And our goal is to help them build connections that improve their mental well-being and deepen their resilience. And we do that through capacity building workshops, one-on-one mentorship, and writing and resilience coaching. And you can learn more about Reyou by visiting our website. SJ will post that in the chat for us as well. She also posted a link for the Reyou community, which is where we're kind of hosting this mindful lunch event. We've got a pretty awesome, safe, brave, and supportive online community where members get to participate in ongoing well-being practice through journaling, storytelling, mindfulness-based stress reduction practices, and community gatherings just like this one. So I invite you to check out our community page and consider subscribing to the community, which is free to join, or you can sign up for one of our sessions. And like I said, SJ's posted those links in the chat. Wonderful. Thank you, SJ. So I want to introduce you to my guest speaker today. Her name is Christine Hanlon. And Christine is an author and former managing editor whose publications include Old Winnipeg, A History in Pictures, and another phenomenal book called Out of Old Manitoba Kitchens. And Christine has a passion for food and people and stories. And she's now retired and enjoying retired life, right, Christine? Give us a wave. And yeah, so she's now retired and she enjoys writing, entertaining, and cooking. And I'm so pleased that Christine is able to drop in for a mindful lunch conversation with me today.
And
Welcome,
I'm very pleased
Christine.
to be here with all of you. Thank you for having me.
Awesome, awesome. So, so mindful lunch is really quite informal. We welcome, the opportunity for audience to connect with us via questions, feedback. If you've got a question, you can raise your hand or type that information into the chat, or you can, and then when you're doing the chat, you can chat with the whole group, or you can chat directly to me or SJ or Christine. So I just want to just take a point now to just introduce SJ Nesbitt. She is doing the technical coordination for our call. She just gave us a wave there in the chat. Sorry, I missed that at the beginning. To just say SJ is there for any technical or admin stuff, and you can also direct message her with any questions that you might want brought forward if you don't want to bring that forward yourself. All right, so thank you, welcome in. So Christine, I'm really excited to get into this conversation. Christine and I talk a lot, and it's really exciting to be able to share some of the things that we have been mulling and talking about and experiencing over the time that we've known each other. So I'm going to ask some questions, which seem kind of weird, me asking Christine, but I'm asking it so that the rest of the audience can be aware of what we're talking about. So Christine, as a writer, you've been a writer and an editor for decades, but you recently shared with me that you are relatively new to journaling. Tell us a little bit about that and what changed? What changed for you?
Well, when I retired, one of the things I wanted to do was journal, and thank goodness, because when I first retired, I thought, oh, great, it's going to be easy. I'm going to, this big weight will be lifted, and I will be able to relax and just do everything I want and feel at ease. And none of this happened when I retired. I was really out of sorts. I felt untethered. I felt really I didn't know what direction to go in. I felt so. Then, fortunately, I found Patlee and I found journaling. And the thing is, the pause that we just did, that was one of the wonderful things about journaling. It forced me to pause. So that was the first thing. The other thing too is I had all these misconceptions about journaling. And I took a course with Patlee about journaling, and that was really an eye-opener. It really changed my mind about what journaling was. So I used to think, I don't know if many of you thought this, that for journaling, I would have to journal every day. I'd have a specific time that I would do it, and I'd have to do it in my little journal all the time, and that's what journaling was about, and it was the thoughts that would happen that day. Well, that's actually not really how journaling works for me. Maybe it does for some people, but it didn't actually work for me. And then I was introduced to this whole idea of atomic habits, this book, that Atomic Habits, that Patlee, that was one of the things. And it talked about how when you journal, the best way to make it into a habit is to listen to the need for doing it, to have something that you need to work out. For me, journaling helped me to make sense of things. And when I retired, I really needed to make sense of things. I realized that right away when everything felt like a big storm around me. I realized that I needed to make sense of things. Mm-hmm. So that's the first thing, is what they call the cue, like to realize that something is necessary. Something is needed. You need something. You need to work something out. And then it's the whole idea of the craving. So knowing, really sinking into that feeling that you need to do that you need to work that thing out, and then actually following through and doing it. So how many times have we thought, oh, you know what, I wish I could write something down right now, that I could do some journaling. And then you say, oh, I'll do it later, right? And then you don't. So that was the other thing that I figured out in this course, is that journaling doesn't have to be in the journal. So there was one moment that I really had a situation where I really needed to process it. I really needed to sit down, and I had the time at that moment, and I sat at a bus bench and I pulled out my phone and I used the notes on my phone to write things down and to work through that. So it really was amazing. Also, Patlee has a journaling session, a guided journaling session that she does once a month. And that really was useful for me too, because it was a different way of journaling. So we did a lot of it in the journal, but sometimes we had comments online, and sometimes even with the meditations that we do afterwards, there's a prompt to do some journaling, and it's that cue that makes you want to do it, wants to reflect on what you're experiencing. So I think journaling is a lot about reflecting and processing, and I found out from the course too that, for some people, journaling is about drawing. Some people express themselves more through, it's not for me. I tried also the verbal, like recording myself. That didn't work out for me either. For me, writing is something that's necessary for the journaling. But I don't always have my journal with me, so I have different ways of doing it. Sometimes it's on the computer, sometimes it's on my phone, sometimes it is in the journal. But the thing is to really sink into that need, and then it's rewarding, and it makes it so much more rewarding than saying, oh, it's 9 o'clock, it's time to journal, I'm going to sit down and do it. That didn't work for me.
Yeah, there's a lot of we put a lot of restrictions around ourselves when it comes to sort of allowing ourselves to engage in the writing that we need for that moment of wholeness and well-being and connection, right? And I'll just share with everyone that's here that what Christine is talking about when she mentions the cue and the craving and the reward. We actually in this journaling workshop that I teach, we use one of the tools that we use is James Clear's 4 stages of habit process, that the habit feedback loop, the cue, craving, response, reward. And I think we have a link for that we can actually share in the chat with a little bit of a blur, but it comes from James Clear's work, and he's the author of Atomic Habits. So we kind of adapt that to the journaling process in terms of being able to understand why and when we need to use that process when we think about journaling.
Absolutely. And I've been doing a lot more journaling since then. And it's really, really helped me process things and work things out and move forward. And I came and find that ease that I was looking for in my retirement, and really, yeah. So, and I listen to those cues much more often, and I journal much more often than I used to. I don't journal every day, but that's okay. I do it when it makes sense.
Absolutely. And that's the only thing that we need to do, right? Like, I think that's the thing that we need to emphasize and understand, like, it's what makes sense for you at this point based on where you're at, as opposed to doing it like an automaton. That's sort of my view of it. It makes it a lot more fun when you can do it that way, and something to look forward to.
It's a lot more meaningful and rewarding.
Yes. So, I'm sorry, can you hear my phone ringing there? Oh, good. Thank you. Yes. So SJ, remember that thing I was saying, that I'm feeling so light because, there's that not in my Thursday today. Well, there it was. It just came in there. But let's move on for a little bit. I'm sorry, SJ, would you be able to take over and just get to the next question with Christine for me, please? I'm sorry, I've just got to run. I've got an emergency call from my kid's school here that I've got to answer.
Yeah, no problem.
And actually, as Patlee goes to do this, that's actually one of the things I learned from journaling too, is that, life continues to happen. So you're going to need to, and so that need to journal continues to be a need. And except now I'm not ignoring it, or saying, I'll do it later, I'll do it another time. I'm actually using it as a useful tool. It's a really useful tool to help me process and what life throws at me, and where I want to go with my life.
So can we talk a little bit about your book now? Out of the Old Manitoba Kitchens. What moved you to write the book, and what was the best part about doing it?
Well, And I think Patlee and I had discussed a little bit about the difference between journaling and storytelling, right? So I'm going to start with some of the similarities, just to tie in with what we were talking about before. So for me, storytelling is a really good way of making sense of the world. You know, not just my immediate, something immediate, but broader. So that's a similarity and also the difference, because it's a way to make sense of the broader world, not just, you know, an immediate issue that you might be dealing with, or just a reflection. So the book, I wanted to write the book as the story of Manitoba, right? But it was through food. And it was my publisher had thrown this out to me as an idea. And so I thought about it, and I thought, what a perfect way to tell the story of Manitoba, because food is something that brings us all together. It's something we all share. We all need to eat, right? First of all, but also it is such an important part of culture. It's an important part of celebration, of connection, of families getting together. It's an important part of what you pass on. Right? So it's a very important part of your story. And it was a very important part of the story of Manitoba. So that's how I said about it. And I started like right from the very beginning, looking back, like how this had an impact, like right from the very beginning. It helped to tell the story of Manitoba. And one example of that was when the Scottish workers came to work for the Hudson's Bay Company, and they had children with some of the Indigenous women that were here. And at that time, there was no flour before the Hudson Bay Company had come. But one thing that the Scottish settlers brought was this idea of bannock. Now, bannock is actually a Scottish thing. It means just a round bread. That they had a round unleavened bread. And so the Indigenous women wanted to make this bannock for their partners, their Scottish partners, the Scottish men, and they took this. The Hudson's Bay Company brought the flour, but there was no butter. There were no cows at that time, so they substituted with bison grease to make the bannock. And now of course bannock is mostly made with lard, so that's how this sort of came about. And then many of the Scottish men went back to their wives back in Scotland, and the women stayed with the children. But bannock became something that became part of their experience. And now we think about it as a Manitoba thing, very much an Indigenous and Manitoba food. But that small story helps to explain so much, right, about what was happening at that time. There's just so much. It was such a rich story. So, and it's interesting because Patlee and I talked about that, about the whole notion of history, and often history is told from the point of view of men. If you look at historical documentation, it really is. And you know, men focused on like the wars, the political events that happened, and the day-to-day and cultural history, that's her story a lot of the time. And food and recipes that were passed on, that's sort of, and the oral history that was passed on is often her story. When I did the research for this book, I had a really hard time actually sometimes finding the stories about food, because you'd read a big document, you read something about the history of Manitoba, and there'd be only this tiny little bit about food in it, because that's her story. That was something that was taken for granted, right? And so, but and some of the rich written documentation I did find was on the side of recipes.
Mm-hmm.
But again, you know, that was it was a way for me to make sense of the whole history of Manitoba. So, Patlee, all good?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And thank you so much, SJ, for taking over for me while I dealt with that little emergency. This is really brilliant. I saw that SJ put the question in the chat: what food or recipe brings your family and community together? And I'm just kind of wondering if if you want to weigh in on that, by just typing into the chat, if there's like a food or a recipe that your family tends to come together around from time to time, like is there that one thing that you have in your own family culture that really sort of is that thing that really is the gel, the glue that brings you all together, or the recipe that you remember engaging with? While you're putting that in the chat, I just want to like this. So this is what that book Out of Old Manitoba Kitchens looks like. And I've been devouring this book because like we talked about this, Christine. I said that this, my husband picked it up and he said, oh, I thought this was a recipe book. And it's like, it's full of stories. And it's like, yeah, it's a Manitoba storybook. It's not a recipe book. But I just love the way that it's been done, because this is something that really touches me. This idea that, in what you are unable to uncover through the research, through talking to people, through listening to people's stories, like you produce something that for me makes me feel like I'm getting access to somebody or several families' journals, their personal journals about their own family culture and food history, and the way that certain food items bring them together. And one of the things that I like about the book is that there's a lot of personal storytelling in here, those oral stories that are passed down from mothers to their daughters, and the aunts and the aunties and so on, and just kind of holding that in terms of that oral tradition, which makes a lot of sense as to why we talk about the her story, because it's the food and the caregiving and the life-giving component of our historical or civilizational development that often never gets written down, when we take that for granted as something that kind of just happens, while the stuff that oftentimes does get written down are the things that are really sort of more life depleting and resource depleting, and pushing us more towards that sort of inhuman side. I'm just going to check in with the chat here to see what some of the responses have been around food that has been bringing your family and community together. We've got from Elaine, home-cooked Mennonite soups.
Yes, actually, it's really funny because we were having guests over or from out of town, and that's things I'm going to dig into. So is that because I want to share all the different cultures with our guest, and that's the way that I'm going to do it. I was just writing down a list of things I wanted to make, and the homemade Mennonite soups were in there. So
homemade Mennonite, yes, I remember reading about that. Yeah. SJ put marshmallow s'mores are on the fire. Awesome. Paula wrote Brazilian style barbecue as a food that brings her family or the recipe that brings her family and community together.
Well, that makes me think of a place that I have to take my guest.
Yes.
Brazilian barbecue in town.
Brazilian barbecue.
Yeah.
And Geraldine, right, it used to be over Easter to eat traditional Mennonite bread, pasca. I remember reading about pasca, and eggy sweetbread that our family would overload with icing. That sounds so yum.
Oh, pudding.
Yummy, so good. Yeah. And from Janine, our family's favorite dessert was called grandma's pudding. Like Janine, if you want to come on forward and say that.
Pudding à ma mère.
Ah, perfect.
I'm muted. It's okay.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, I'm muted.
Which literally means pudding for the unemployed. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? What pudding for the unemployed?
We always
Just
just call it
something
pudding à ma mère, but later we found out that it was an old Quebecois recipe, and it was generally called pudding chômeur, and literally chômeur means unemployed. So we never realized we were eating and loving unemployed pudding. So
what's in it, Janine? What are the ingredients?
Well, probably something very cheap, right? If you take from the name, I think it's just flour kind of dumplings, in a kind of a sauce, a syrupy sauce. That was
Oh,
probably just yeah. So like
yeah.
as kids, this was like such a special treat. We had it maybe every couple of months, and it was like running around the neighborhood telling everyone we were having pudding à ma mère tonight.
And did everyone in the neighborhood come and get their share of pudding?
No, 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 no. They just envied us.
That's amazing.
Interesting how it tells a story itself, right? About how when the unemployed people when they were unemployed, they made this because it was very basic, and that's how they got through it, maybe.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that like those are the memories or the ideas that were coming to me as I kind of read through this book, Christine. Like just this understanding of the community and the connection and that shared sort of value around coming together around food, regardless of the different heritages and cultures that we might come from. I mean, and it was eye-opening for me, like through this book, I got a better sense. Like I know I have quite a few community members, and I have lots of friends who are from these different heritages and cultures, and some are indigenous and First Nations heritage, some are Ukrainian, some are Icelandic, some are English, Scottish. And just reading through this book, I felt like I had this first person sort of seat to their lives, and it really clicked, like just knowing. So I'm like, okay, I was there when your grandparent was doing this particular thing, or your aunt was doing this, but so I get it. I feel that sense of connection. Like I understand you a little bit more now. That's a really amazing thing to be able to connect with over food. I just want to bring out one more thing that's in the chat here coming from Heidi, where she says that this is synchronistic for me as I just finished my essay around my mother's little wooden recipe box. Her recipe for corn pudding is a dish that appeared at all our family dinners. And it came from her great-grandmother, or came from Heidi's great-grandmother, who grew up on a plantation in Georgia. And it was her mommy's recipe. So it's brought up some deep inquiry for me about my family history and whose story is whose. Isn't that amazing? That is the power of story and the power of food. This is why I love food. And that point from Heidi actually kind of segues really nicely into my next question for you, Christine, which is kind of coming back to the point about the value of these oral stories and how important they are to our identity and our meaning making and our community building. And the oral stories are great. They serve this really great purpose of creating lineage connections, like making sure that we have that connection from one generation to the next. But why is it important for us to write these stories down? Like, why is it that it's important to write these essays like Heidi is pointing out? Or why is it important to have, these recipes and these oral stories captured in books like this?
Well, one reason is that they can be shared more broadly. When a story is written down or published, it reaches a much greater number of people, but also you can explore the story in more depth when you write it, and pull out some of the meanings of it and dig deeper. As well, you can bring in other stories. Sometimes it's a story about one person, but actually it's other people. There are similar stories or connected stories that can be brought in and again give greater depth and greater meaning to that story. So I think there's a lot of value. I think as human beings, story is something that we need almost. It's a human need to have story to give us some sort of meaning. And that's why the story arc, sort of the, beginning, middle, and end type of idea is really that, I think, something that resonates with everyone. So yeah, so writing them down, and some oral stories do get lost and so this is a way of preserving them as well. And I'm so grateful for all the archives and all the little wooden boxes with the recipes in them that, you know, are in places such as the St. Boniface Museum and the Archives of Manitoba that preserve some of those little pieces, you know, stories that are augmented by some of the oral stories that people have shared with me. Yeah.
No, and that is really a great gift, isn't it? That is such a great gift. And I don't think, like, you know, like I don't think generationally we appreciate the connection of that gift or what that gift means. Like I grew up without I grew up like literally, you know, tiny nuclear family. No aunts, no grandparents, no cousins, no great grandparents, or so on. And so I can definitely attest to what that feels like to have that loss of lineage and what it does for one's identity, even if you're immersed in your own sort of heritage and culture, like not having that familial connection. And the idea of stories and recipes being passed down, because I feel like that's an important part of our resilience factor. To be able to have that cultivation of the story. But writing, like, you know, having that and being able to find that sometimes even after they've been lost is so important.
Well, and you know, I actually didn't share this with you before. This is something that I haven't shared with you before, but that I think is important because it really illustrates the value of both of the oral storytelling and of the writing. Before my father died 5 or 6 years ago now, he was my stepfather, and he worked as a waiter during my life. And this is an important fact because, you know, he was away when I was at home. So even though we were a family, I never really got to know my dad as well as I could have, because we didn't have that time to interact. We didn't have time to talk. He didn't have time to share those stories. You need that time, right? And so before he passed away, you know, in his 90s, and I thought, you know, what other gift can I give him? So I sat down with him every Sunday for months and listened to his story and wrote it down. And then I actually produced a book. Actually, I have it here. And this book for my dad. And it's the story of his life.
Oh.
And, you know, it was a gift that I was giving to him, but in the end, the gift what ended up being for me, because I got to know him so much better and we became so much closer in that time. And it was the most beautiful thing. It really was.
Oh.
Yeah. So, yes, it's those oral stories, that storytelling is so important.
That is beautiful. That is beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that with us. Did not know that. And
Yeah.
Christine, you're working on another story now that has to do with food and Manitoba and stories.
Yes, there's actually food in that. Isn't there food in every story? Really? Yes. This time,
all the good stories.
yes. That makes me think of a really small anecdote in that story that was gifted to me. Like, I really feel like the story was gifted to me in 2019, right at the beginning of the pandemic. And here's this little story about food. It was about the Japanese internees. Now, I don't know if any of you know that there were Japanese Canadians interned in Manitoba during the Second World War. They were working in sugar beet farms, on sugar beet farms. And I didn't know this. But one little food anecdote from that story is that soy sauce is very important to Japanese people. And they brought some with them from BC. But of course, they were here for quite a long time and they ran out. Eventually they ran out. But they found a way. One of the characters, one of the people in the story found a way to make soy sauce out of other things.
Oh.
Because it was so important to them culturally. And that was a real triumph for them in the face of all the adversity that they face. So yeah, at the beginning of the pandemic, I sat down with a friend, a Japanese Canadian friend of mine, And I never really questioned, like, how did she get here, you know? And it turns out that her mother was brought here from BC to work on the sugar beet farms during the Second World War. And I just knew that this was a story I had to tell. You know, you just feel it in your bones. So, and it was the most joyous thing for me to work on that story. Actually, that became where the real purpose of my first purpose for my retirement. Because writing was something that I did all the time when I was working, and writing other people's stories. But it was always with an audience in mind, you know, always with, like, how was it going to be received? Like, it was for someone. So I had to write it to satisfy that person's needs. When I took this story, I just dove into it and I wrote it just to tell the story. And it was so much more joyous and satisfying to me. It was freeing. It was really freeing. So storytelling, and it helped, you know, it helped me work out some things because these stories, that's the other thing, is they connect all of us, right? One of the things that fascinates me in storytelling is this whole notion of othering. And I think there's a lot of that going on in this world right now, you know. And so I was able to explore that more deeply through this story, which is a good example of how that othering was used to control people and how did they deal with it, you know. And that's so, and because the story, yes, it's about one person, but it's about us too. I think it's important when we read stories that it connects with us on a human level. Those are the best stories, I find, the ones that connect with us on a human level. And even when they're about other people, we realize that other people, that there is always that connection with us. We see ourselves in other people's stories.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really important. And, you know, that's why stories have persisted for so long, and we love them so much too, I think, because they resonate with us. They touch us. I think the best stories really connect with us and touch us and cause us to reflect and explore new ways of thinking sometimes too, about our own stories and about other people's stories.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, thank you for sharing that, Christine. I totally agree with you on that. And we've talked about this in different conversations that we've had, that, you know, the story and the storytelling is really more about creating that connection and understanding.
yes.
Whereas the journaling is really more of an internal sort of self-oriented kind of processing mechanism, right? And even though the two might involve writing, they're certainly for, you know, certainly aimed at different purposes. One is really very internal and sort of helping you to reflect and process,
Yes.
as opposed to the storytelling that is really about creating that connection and understanding with someone outside yourself. And it certainly might take some journaling to get there, but it doesn't always have to be the catalyst for it, right?
Yeah, stories are for sharing. That's for.
Yeah. I want to just bring the audience in with another question, and this is kind of picking up on what Heidi Hunter had written in her chapter about her food connection story and that little wooden recipe box. So Heidi, you mentioned that you had written an essay around that. I'm just kind of wondering, and the question is in the chat. Has anyone else written down any of their family's oral stories, or would you consider doing that? You can put that answer in the chat, or you can unmute and come on forward. Like, have you considered writing down your story, or if you have already, like, what, you know, have you written down any of your family's oral stories? So Heidi, for this essay, would you mind sharing what was the context of that essay that you were writing?
Absolutely. It turned into an essay. It came from journaling, and I was I found this little recipe box that I had in my back pantry of my mom's recipe box, and I was just journaling about it, and later on I began to write a little conversation with it, and I realized there were only 3 recipes in it that I really use, and those 3 recipes, one was for my mom's homemade bread. And again, that brought it back stories, but it was written on the back of my wedding invitation. And with again, and it was a lime green kind of joke invitation because we had an after the fact barbecue, and it brought in my whole, like, the whole story. It's all about stories, right? So that one, just personally, on the back of my wedding invitation, I had begged my mom, she was an artist, to draw my ex-husband and I shackled at the neck, just saying, come to our after effect barbecue. And it really became an inquiry in this writing, like, why was everything it had to be such a joke, and why couldn't I take things seriously in that? But then it went back into more stories from the marriage, and it went back in my writing to stories that he had from his family. It was great. So from one little thing, I'm always writing stories that have been passed down. So
Wonderful. And I just love that idea. Like, I'm a huge fan of what I call artifact storytelling, right? Because I feel like that's one of the easiest ways to get into story, where we start with an object, right? And just embracing the heuristic elements of what that object does for us, and letting the story bloom from there. And you get so many other stories that are just cascading out of that at any point in time, that you can just pick out and say, this is a story I'm going to amplify today, or this is the one I'm going to write down, or this is the one I'm going to preserve. Yeah.
I have one more thing to say, just to that, in that artifact, it became a theme. It became a holder, not just of recipes, but it was like I was like, I could go microfiching in there. And it was also about handwriting, because different handwritings, written history, again, which took me to a binder that my mom had left me of her writings, and just seeing, I haven't been able to read it yet. So again, that from that little recipe box opened a lot of questions.
Oh, I just love seeing the excitement and the energy on your screen, Heidi, as you talk about the feelings that come from reconnecting with the idea of that story. That's just amazing. That is lovely. That is beautiful to see. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing that. And if you ever need a space to make that story or that essay a little bit more publicly known, I'm just gonna say we do have a story sharing blog on our website, where we share what we call resilience stories. And that's exactly what that space is for persons who just want to put those stories out into the universe, so that it can become that connector for other people, and build that understanding and that sense of, resilience by just sharing those stories that we find in ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I also like that whole sense of discovery that, that you were, that's one of the things I love about writing stories as well. I am doing the research, like looking through the little boxes is part of the discovery, but also just when you start to write, all of a sudden it's the connections between different things that you start to discover, or, you bring something in, oh yeah, that's right, that was connected to this. And then you go off and you do some more discovering. And I just love that part of it, that whole process of it.
Perfect. That is lovely. I cannot believe how much time has gone past, and I feel like we're just sort of scratching the surface with talking about stories, but this is what happens sometimes in Mindful Lunch. And this is one of the reasons why we carry on the conversation in the Reyou community, where we get to engage in those online discussions and forums and answer questions and share our thoughts in that space. I want to just say thank you very much to Christine for joining me for today's mindful lunch session. I feel like we need to have like another public outing with this conversation, right? So much to absorb. There are a number of resources that we're gonna share with persons after this, along with the recording, and that will include some of the links that we have there. And I want to say thank you also to Christine for the book, like this book, which for me is a surprising summer. It's gonna get me ready for my summer of road tripping, because like there's so many places that are mentioned here that I'm just like, yeah, I want to go back and experience that place with, now that I have this new knowledge about the food and the history and the people that are there. Another
Tiny story about the book, or no? From the book? No? Or are we wrapping up?
So we have to wrap up. Well, we have to wrap up because it's 12:54.
Oh.
And I know some people are gonna have to dash to their next thing in their workday. If you are able to stay on for a little bit longer, you're welcome to do so. I just wanna just let you know that the mindful journaling workshop that Christine spoke about, we're currently, that the next year of that is in August. And we've got our writing workshops opening up for registration in the fall. So please check out the links if you're interested in any of those courses with us. And yeah, let's keep the stories flowing in our communities in any way that we can. Thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciate it. Walk good.
Thank you so much for having me. And the only thing I was going to say is touching on what you said was, yes, there's so many wonderful stories out there in Manitoba. So if you have a chance this summer, go out and find them.
Perfect. All right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.
You.